my, where things come from is learning about labor unions and learning that, yeah, American Federation of Musicians, we're just only a very part of it. And in order to get support, get ideas, it's one doesn't hear about unions. One shouldn't only hear about unions when there are problems. One should hear about unions when there are good things. One should hear about unions just simply as a way of life. And very late in my life, which means probably just a couple of years ago, actually, I learned about labor councils. Okay, so I am very grateful to field coordinator Wendy Colucci, who it's great on the phone because I could just call her up and say, and she would translate that into something that was coherent. So Wendy is a lot of the reason why a lot of this came together, including our honored guest, Thomas DiNapoli, and our honored guests from the Labor Council, Area Labor Federation. We have with us today, as I said, we have Anne-Marie Talercio and we have Ken Greenleaf. Labor councils are about being a resource for unions. And so there's a multitude in that resource. So I'm happy to introduce Anne-Marie and Ken.
And none of us are above the law. No, I'm working. And the law, right? Now, thank you, Madam President. I like saying that. And I have two of my, Kenny's he's the Vice President. He's also the Region 5 leader of CSCA. He's the president of that whole group of CSCA public sector workers. And then I have Tim Backus, who is also the president of the Tri-County Labor Council. Now, I'm the president, I would say my paid job, I represent the hotel and restaurant workers. And in this capacity today, we represent the Area Labor Federation, which is a regional AFL-CIO body. And if you know union people, we never go anywhere alone. This is what we do, whether it's to talk to a boss or even to talk to a coworker or to come to the middle of New York State on a beautiful Sunday. We come with each other. This is our support. And that's what the Area Labor Federation is all about. I got involved because I was on strike and I got involved with the local labor council as a union member. As the Area Labor Fed, we represent 200 different unions in central New York in 11 counties. So when we say we're here to support the musicians, whether it's a good fight, a bad fight, or just a fun time, and by the way, I know most of you by your sound, because I have been to Cobra class, so I know you instinctively. But we're here, we bring 100,000 union members in 11 counties to support you. That's what we do. That's what union people do. We support each other. We stand up with each other. We stand up for the little guy because we're leaders, and God bless everyone here who's involved in their union because that's the only way it's successful. Now, besides us, we have partners. And some of our partners are elected officials. And luckily, they're not all like the ones you talked about in your song. And that's really, besides telling you that we're here to support all of you, and I'm very excited today because part of our mission as the Area Labor Fed is to get our story out. Labor union stories are never front page unless there's a strike. So we all have to speak to each other, speak to our neighbors, stand up for that living wage that we got passed. Stand up for each other. Stand up for the nurses that are on strike or the teachers that are on strike. Because non-union people don't understand. If a nurse goes on strike, those are really bad conditions in that hospital. They're not some greedy worker. That's what it's all about. We stand up for the community. And we need help. And as I mentioned, we have one of our partners. He's a man of the people. He went and put his feet where his mouth was when he was 18. And that's, we're about the same age. That's when we got to vote as 18-year-olds. And instead of just going to vote, he went and ran for office, and Mineola became a trustee of the Board of Ed. So I'm so proud to welcome Tom DiNapoli, who's our New York State Controller. And if you go to his website, besides, he always is looking for money that has been forgotten, and you might get a big check. That's really your money. He's also out to make sure that this state, all the companies we work for, the organizations we interact with, our actual local entities locally, our elected officials locally, all play by the rules. And I'm so proud to be the one who gets to announce Tom DiNapoli. He is our man of the people.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
How did you arrange such a perfect afternoon? Ruth, good job. Give her a round of applause as your president of the small club. I drove up from Long Island, and we did a little bit of rain before we got here, not too much. But it's certainly a reminder coming to this part of the state, just how fortunate we are to live in New York. And for those of you who've chosen to live in this part of the state, boy, did you make a wonderful choice. It really is great for me to be with all of you. And I enjoyed listening to the song and the music and the comments that were being made. How wonderful that you are reminding those of you who are members already of this local, of the American Federation of Musicians, how important the work is that you're continuing to do. I gather some of you are prospective members, so I think it's great you came out, and I can just tell you, I get to go to a lot of union meetings, and the spirit that Ruth has brought as president and the long history of this local as well, if you're not already a member, you'd be smart to become a member. That's my recommendation as your state controller, okay? Yeah, that's worthy of applause. And also with Anne-Marie and Ken and Tim here and colleagues, Anne-Marie gave you a very important message, and that message is that you're not alone. It's not just about this local, but you're part of a larger union family here in New York State. And we are very fortunate that New York is the state with the highest percentage of workforce that is unionized. It is a state, unlike many other states in the union, that is certainly still viewed as a labor-friendly state, and you see that in legislative action that took place even during this session, right? The farm worker rights, finally, after how many years was adopted, and, right? And forever, a long time. And the legislative changes in response to the Janus decision. I mean, there's so many other things Anne-Marie touched on. The fight for the living wage, raising the minimum wage in the state. You go down a long list of recent achievements in the legislature, but that doesn't just happen. It happens because men and women are organized through unions, and the unions then talk to the elected officials, and your voice does have an impact, and your voice does make a difference. I want to commend you as well for choosing to be musicians. I'm somewhat jealous of what you've chosen to do. First of all, it seems to me in life we need a lot more of the aesthetics and appreciation of the arts, and the fact that you've made this your career, I think is wonderful, whether you're part of Glimmer Glass or all the other different opportunities and venues in this part of the state. Thank you for what you do to make our communities more beautiful and more rewarding. I've only had the privilege to go to Glimmer Glass once. Yes, I know I have to go back again, and I will. Right? I told you, right? I will, I swear. In elementary school, I was a trombone player. Don't applaud. Don't applaud. So, Meadow Drive Elementary School in Albertson, Long Island. Very few people were willing to take a brass instrument, you know. So the brass section was me and my friend Paul Kopp, who played the trumpet. And my distinguishing accomplishment when I was in elementary school as a trombone player is that I was the single worst trombone player that ever played at the Meadow Drive Elementary School. But the music director, Mr. Aldrich, would not let me quit because he desperately needed a trombone and he needed to double the size of the brass section. And literally one day, I did in fact get away with dropping out. And those of you can appreciate how dedicated and fierce those are who are music directors can be. He literally drove down the block, and I was playing in the street. We were playing kickball, and Mr. Aldrich drove down the block, pulled over, came out of the car, and said, "Come here. You cannot quit. You must continue with the trombone." And I did. It was torture for me and torture for those who had to listen to me. And it wasn't until I got to junior high that I was able to get out of it. So I admire what you do and what you've chosen to do as a profession. And if you gave me a trombone now, I wouldn't know what the hell to do with it. But I did try. I would not be qualified, Ruth, to be one of your members, though. I definitely would have. But I really do have appreciation for what you do, and I do think it is so very, very important. You've already heard some of the themes, and I'll really just emphasize it, because I think there's a lot we take for granted with the impact that unions have in our communities. And unions don't just happen. They happen because people come together and they choose to make a difference. And I think Anne Marie said it well. It's not just about the tough times or when there's a strike in the extreme, but it's also about the support of each other, that broader sense of community. And I think this wonderful memorial fund that you have for Charles England, and it's nice to have his family here to hear these beautiful words. That's another part of what being part of the union family is all about. And that's appreciating each other, remembering colleagues, and obviously to do this kind of outreach, community education, professional development, scholarship. I mean, those are really impactful endeavors that you have underway with the Memorial Fund. It's another element of the ways in which being part of this union is a way of giving back. The reality, though, is that there are times where the tough times do happen. And that's really the purpose of the union. I grew up on Long Island, some of you could tell by the accent. And when I grew up in the 50s and the 60s, I grew up in pretty much a blue-collar neighborhood. Nobody had a whole lot, but everybody kind of had enough to have a decent lifestyle. Most of us were either children or grandchildren of immigrants. Nobody had any, extraordinary story. It was kind of the typical American story that probably most of you are a part of as well. In my case, my grandparents were immigrants from Italy. Came here with literally nothing. They just had their faith and their hopes. They came around the turn of the last century. And my parents were both born here. They went to the public schools. They were high school graduates. That was a great leap forward in the educational attainment for my family, because my grandparents weren't educated people in any formal way. And my parents went into the workforce. My dad was a veteran of World War II. He came back. Parents married, stayed in the area. My father worked for, some of you old enough to remember the simple days when we had one telephone company, Ma Bell. You didn't have to make the choices like you have today. He was a lineman for New York Tel. They climbed telephone poles and worked in manholes. And he got active in the union, Communication Workers of America. And he was a shop steward. And I can remember when there was a strike against New York Tel and what it was like, because he was a steward. So all the strike signs were lined up in the dining room, and Dad was working with his fellow employees to get the information out there about the picket line and everything that they had to do. And I remember what it was like when the food at the dinner table was a little different, when Dad was on strike. So I always say that my addiction to macaroni and cheese happened when we couldn't eat meat during the telephone strike. But it was an important lesson for me to see at a young age. My mom explained to me the reason things are a little different is your father's on strike. Why is he on strike? The workers have to be together to look out for better wages and better working conditions. And it made a difference. My mom, when she went back into the workforce after I got a little older, my brother got a little older, she became clerk at County Police Headquarters in Nassau County. She was a member of CSEA, Civil Service Workers. Salary wasn't very high, but it was a job that came at a time in our family's history where my brother and I were becoming of college age, and that extra income made a difference to enable us to go on to college. And I remember my mom, she would always get from the controller's office the statement about where she was at with her pension. Now that I'm controller, I think about that. She'd be at the kitchen table, open up that statement from the controller, and knowing that she would have that defined benefit pension at the end of her working time really gave her a lot of security about what the golden years would be like. Unfortunately, my mom passed away before she could retire, but I remember vividly how important it was for her to know that she was working in a job where the unions looked out for her, gave her decent working conditions, gave her the dignity of a pension that could be there when she retired. So all of these lessons I think about in terms of my own family's history, had it not been for the union movement and the unions that looked out for my parents when they were working, we would not have had the middle class lifestyle that we had, and I would not have had the opportunities that I had to go on to go to college and do what I'm doing with my life. It really was because of the union movement. And I find there are so many people today who have a similar story, and very often they may not be in union jobs, maybe they're lawyers, they're professionals, and very often they disparage unions. Oh, we don't need, the unions are an anachronism, something from the past. Unions are what's driving up the cost rate. We don't need them anymore. And it always troubles me when people view the unions as the source of our problems today, because nothing can be further from the truth. And I find invariably when I ask someone who speaks like that, well, tell me a little bit about your background. What did your parents do? And you know what? The story's always similar to my story. If not their parents, their grandparents were immigrants, they were union people. And I look and I say, how could you forget what it was that enabled your parents to secure a life that gave you the opportunities that you're enjoying today? And that's really, I think, the challenge to the union leadership of today, is to work to provide those opportunities for the families who are coming up today, just as so many of us have those same opportunities that were guaranteed by the unions. Now, I'm not an expert on your profession, obviously, because I didn't do so well in elementary school with that trombone. But I know it's the same as with any job. Each industry, each profession has its own challenges, its own unique dynamics. And obviously, because of the different venues that you work in, I know some of you are involved with public schools or with SUNY, and then you do the fiberglass work or some other work. So, how you manage your contracts and some of your issues is a uniqueness to your profession that is only strengthened by being involved with this local and with this union. And your profession is no different than any other. We're living in a time of rapid change, technology, new sources of people getting entertainment, among other kinds of information. So it's a dynamic and a changing environment out there. And while it would be great to think you can navigate all of that on your own, the reality is that there is strength in numbers. And that's, again, the purpose of being part of this federation, of this union of musicians, of this local as well, to be plugged into the network in central New York and the statewide network, and to know that you're not going to be alone. Yeah, there are times where still there is some kind of united action that's required, sometimes even a strike. And that's where collective action is important. There are times when you may find either a disciplinary situation or, God forbid, a dismissal situation, and you don't want to be there on your own. You want to have the support. You want to have a union behind you who knows how to stand up for you and on your behalf. Some of these issues are not new issues. They're the same issues that when they were organizing unions, over a century ago that were there. But we have to be in the reality of 2019. And the reality of 2019 is that we live at a time. I won't get into what's happening in Washington. I'm so glad I'm in Albany, not in Washington. Right? People used to make fun of Albany. I'll take it over Washington anytime, given what's going on. But we're living in a tough time. Tremendous divisions. And I really view the union movement as an opportunity not only for democracy, and we've made that point, but also for giving us a renewed sense of community. I think that's so very, very important. We live in a time also where we know that issues of distribution of wealth in the country are serious issues. The income inequality that's there. We see the top margins of a society, doing better and better, and a lot of folks being way left behind, and most folks kind of in the middle and struggling. And we see the real household income going down, right? Everybody says, you know, the economy's really strong, stock market's up, yeah, but the earning power for American families is not. The counterbalance to that dynamic and to the too much power that corporations have in our society, it's the union movement. It always has been. So when we talk about the middle class being threatened, is it any surprise that it's happening at the same time that unions are under assault? That union membership in many states is going down, going in reverse. I believe there is a direct connection, and it's something we need to be vigilant about. Ruth mentioned the right to work movement in so many of the states. That's not a good dynamic, but you know, when people come together in collective action, it can make a difference. Missouri, was it 2 years ago, passed a right to work law, becoming I think the 27th or 28th state to have that. And every state is a little different. In Missouri, if there's a law that's passed by the legislature that people don't like, they're allowed to petition for a referendum. And so this right to work law that passed by the legislature was put up before the public for a vote. Now, we're talking Missouri, we're not talking New York and California, right? You know what happened there? The unions got together, educated the public about what this would mean, and in Missouri, the voters rejected the right to work law. The voters rejected it. In New York, there's a proposal in, I guess, 2017 for a constitutional convention. Some of you remember that. So under every 20 years in New York, we have to vote on whether or not to have a constitutional convention. Many of the people who were advocating for it not for good reasons. And there was a very dedicated group that particularly wanted to attack the constitutional protection for defined benefit pensions in our state constitution for our public workers, and other labor protections that are in the Constitution, environmental protections, the guarantee of education opportunity as well, a whole series of issues that would have been under assault and attack. And all the polling showed in New York that it was going to pass overwhelmingly. Why? You know, people didn't like some of the things that were coming out of Albany. Easy way to change things, let's have a constitutional convention. That was the simple message. Well, you know what happened? The unions stepped up. The public sector unions concerned about the pension, the private sector unions concerned about the other labor protections, and got their own members organized. And then reached out to the larger community, to the public, and said, you know, there's more to lose than gain by having this constitutional convention. And just having the convention, you don't know who's going to be in charge of the convention. The special interests that manipulate elections too much already, they'll be the ones to manipulate the delegates. You're going to be voting for something that in the long run has more risk than any possible reward. And by October, we start to see the polls tightened up. It seemed to be 50-50. And by election day in New York, over 80% of New Yorkers voted no on the Constitutional Convention because the unions led the way to educate the community. I mentioned that, yeah, that's worthy of applause. I mentioned those two items only because it shows that the relevance of unions and the strength that still comes in numbers. And that's true whether you're talking about your local issues, for your own industry, for what's affecting you as musicians, or for what's happening in the larger community, and certainly what's happening in New York State. Retirement security. It's an issue I care a lot about because as controller, I'm trustee for our New York State Pension Fund. We're very proud of the fact that we are, not just that we're large, we're the third largest public pension plan in the country, over $210 billion of a pension fund. But what I'm most proud about is not how large we are, it's how well funded we are. We are one of now only 8 states that is over 90% funded out of 50 states in the country. Last year we were only one of 4, but things have gotten a little better in many other states, so we're now one of 8. But we're number 4 out of the 50 states in how well funded we are, about 95% funded. So that means that retirement security that we stand for our public workers, in fact, we can deliver on it. But retirement security is a very big issue for our country. And it really frustrates me, they're not talking about that in the presidential debates. They should be. Because most people do not have a defined benefit pension. And many people don't have any pension at all. Or if they have any kind of savings, it's a 401k. And the 401k 401ks were never set up to be in place of a pension. So that issue of retirement security, whether you're talking about a public fund or a union fund or however you describe it, the reality is for the vast majority of people in our country, we are woefully unprepared for retirement. The expenses are high. The good news is we're all living a whole lot longer, right? My dad passed a couple of years ago. He was 92. And he used to brag on how he had beat out the actuaries from old New York Tel when he was collecting the pension all those years from when he retired in his early 60s. But I mean, that's the reality. And Social Security is not going to be enough to provide. And not everybody's going to have a family that can support them. Another reason for you to be part of this local and part of the larger union community is that the unions understand the issue of retirement security and have been a source to help bolster union funds that have been in trouble, and certainly if you're part of the public system, to be supportive of that. So, whether you're talking about working conditions unique for your very special profession, whether you're talking about an issue like retirement security, whether you're talking about if you really have to stand together to get changes in contracts, whether you're talking about advocating for legislation, whether it's in New York State, or whether it's on the federal level, just check off all those boxes. All of it says that being involved with the union, being a member of the union, all good and compelling reasons. If you add on top of it this wonderful sense of community that this local 443 has, and that really I think is just so beautifully captured by the England Memorial Fund, it's also a way of really being part of a larger family and being there for each other. It's really special that you have a union like this with a very long history and a very long tradition. And any way that you can support each other, know that I would call upon you to do that. Any way that I can support you, I'll join what Anne Marie said. You shouldn't feel alone. You have union brothers and sisters, you have elected officials as well that want to be supportive of you. And I really just, again, want to conclude with how I began. Thank you for choosing a very wonderful profession. And thank you for doing something that really enriches and enhances the aesthetics of all of our community. And those of you who work with young people, don't give up on the bad trombone players, because deep inside they have talent somewhere that you can tap it. I'm sure that you can. And really, it's been a privilege for me to spend some time with you. And I really want to, again,